So today we're going to take a look at summer squash, and there's often this time of the year, the middle of the summer, a huge selection that is available to you. I'd like to put an idea in your head, and the idea is simply this: they almost all taste identical. And so make your choice for other reasons than just variety. Maybe there's a color you like, maybe there's a shape that you like, but recognize the flavor is not going to be particularly different. So I have a selection of squash right here, and all squash start out as blossoms that get fertilized. There's a male blossom right here, and then a female blossom. And the female blossom actually gives fruit. So you can see down here, here's a squash with the blossom. It's a little worse for the wear right now, but the fruit forms right where the blossom is. So male blossoms and female blossoms. The squash begins growing. And, you know, it starts out very small, like these that I have right here, these baby zucchinis. Certainly from a plant perspective, they're not viable yet. There's no seeds in here that could grow another plant. But from a chef's perspective, these might be ideal. Oh, they're so cute, oh, they're so small, they're so tender, they'll fit right on the plate. For whatever reason, a chef might find these very, very attractive. And then they begin to grow. And you can see here another squash. It still has the blossom attached, but it's starting to reach full size. The reason I say starting to, you can see it's pointed at the end here. When it's at full size, it will begin to round on the end. At this point, my suggestion is that there's not seeds in this that are viable, and from a chef's perspective, 2 enthusiastic thumbs up. Why? Because I don't want that seedy part of the vegetable to fall apart and mess up my plates. Now, here's one that's rounded at the end, and it strikes a happy balance between what I call biologic maturity and culinary maturity, because the seeds in this are probably already viable. If I were to leave it on the plant, the squash will grow and grow and grow. And you can see these versions right here. I'll pick this one up. This one is very, very large. I can guarantee you the seeds are viable, and on the inside it's going to be soft and maybe a little bit spongy. This is actually so big and so heavy that the plant can no longer support its weight, and so it rests right on the ground. And you can see the dirt and the pebbles beginning to damage the fruit. Also, the color here has changed a little bit. And this has what I would call a field spot, where it sat on the ground and the sunlight could no longer get to it. So again, choose a variety of squash by all means. Don't expect them to taste different, and instead choose them for culinary maturity. Choose them to suit your purposes. All right. We're going to make a dish that I'm calling a pasta, but it's really a salad. I'm going to take this squash, and I'm going to put it into what's known as a spiralizer, and we'll begin to turn it, and we'll create noodles that are basically squash. The squash is cut so small that it will cook really, really quickly. All right, enough of that. I'll set this aside. We'll gather this up and we'll put it in here. Okay, so if that's our pasta in air quotes, how are we going to flavor it? Well, let me turn on a pan. There we are. And we're going to put a couple of different flavoring agents in here. Olive oil, a nice punchy olive oil that's got good flavor. And then I would like to toast some slivered almonds in that oil. So we'll bring it up to temperature. While that is coming up to temperature, I'm going to take some garlic and we're going to slice it very, very thin. When you're slicing delicate things, you want to use the tip of the knife, and just keep an eye out for your fingers. You know, when you're using garlic, sometimes I would say it's appropriate to have larger pieces like this in a more rustic dish. Other times you might choose to mince it up, and sometimes you'll even make it into a paste so that you don't have big chunks of garlic at all. Anyhow, those are starting to cook. I'm going to flavor this pasta with toasted almonds. Let's turn it down just a hair, and we're going to throw some garlic in there as well. I'm going to wait until I see the first color appearing in this pan right here before I add the garlic. Garlic can brown just a little bit before it starts to become bitter. So I don't want it to become bitter, and for that reason, I'm going to hold back until I see the almonds already beginning to brown. You could do this with pine nuts as well. You could do it with sliced almonds, and it would go even quicker. Okay, we're starting to see some browning, so in goes the garlic. And from this point on, keep an eye on what's going on, because you don't want the garlic to go beyond a pale, pale golden color. While that's happening, I'm going to add some chili flakes. This is Espelette peppers. They are not very hot, so I can afford to put a few pinches in there, but they'll lend a wonderful flavor. Already I'm starting to get the aroma of the garlic. I'm going to have some salt added to this because I know the dish will need it, and black pepper just for complexity's sake. We've already got the chilies. All right. Now, we need to be ready for what's coming down the pike towards us. I'm going to turn this off. Actually, let me set this over here for right now. And in this hot oil, I'm going to place some beautiful little cherry tomatoes. I just want to warm them in the oil. That'll be part of my salad. The small ones I'm going to put in whole, and some of these others I will just cut in half. Now at this point, I've turned the pan off, so you can hear the sizzle, but as I add these tomatoes, it's going to cool that oil just a little bit. Very nice. I'm going to chop some parsley while I have the chance, because it's going to come pretty fast and furious. In a rustic dish like this, nice coarse chopped parsley. Okay, so let's add our pasta to the pan. Now from this point, recognize that you've got about a minute. And that minute is just the time you need to warm the zucchini up. If you cook it, it will turn into sort of a mess. It will turn into sort of a sodden mess in the pan. All the water will begin to bleed out. And I'll just remind you, I have the stove turned off right now, so I think we're in good shape. In goes the parsley. Let's add some pecorino cheese. Parmesan would be a great choice as well. And it's time for us to serve this dish. Make sure that everybody gets a nice selection of the vegetables. The colorful tomatoes, the crunchy and nutty almonds, flakes of garlic. A little more cheese. And there is, in air quotes, summer squash pasta with tomatoes, pecorino, almonds, and garlic. All right, so this time of the year, you've got zucchini everywhere. Not just zucchini, but all kinds of summer squash. I'm going to show you a recipe for grilling summer squash, which is one of my favorite things to do with it. I've got two beautiful squash right here, and I'm going to cut this in half. What I like to do is grill them in large pieces. That way I don't have to handle too many things. Later on, if I want more portions, I can cut the large pieces smaller. So here I've got a zucchini ready to go. I like to score the flesh on the inside. First one way, and then the other. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's decorative, but more than that, it allows these things to cook a little bit more readily. So I'm going to toss these all in a marinade. The marinade is salt and pepper and garlic. And, you know, if you wanted to put some fennel seed or other spices that you like, you could do that certainly. I made it pretty simple here. I like lemon zest in here, so I added some lemon zest to the mix. And then finally some olive oil. Here's our grill. And let's go ahead and place these right on the grill. And we'll get them cooked. While those are busy cooking, let me talk a little bit more about choosing zucchini. We talked about what happens before the zucchini is harvested. Those will give you a larger zucchini or a smaller zucchini. If you give it enough water, it'll be better quality. If you give it good quality soil, you'll get better quality. All of those pre-harvest decisions lead to quality. After the squash has been harvested, there's still things that can go wrong. And that, to me, references condition. So quality is pre-harvest decisions, and condition is post-harvest. Let's say that you leave it in the back of your car for a week, or let's say you don't refrigerate it, or your refrigerator freezes all your vegetables, or you are rough with it. First you put it in the shopping bag and then you put canned goods on top. All of those things will impact condition. And if you take a look here, I singled out a couple of unhappy summer squash that have been abused since they were harvested. They were likely harvested as beautiful vegetables in great quality, but now their condition has suffered. So just recognize the difference. You actually bear a little bit of the responsibility for maintaining your produce in good condition. So take a look there. There is a beautiful squash in great condition. Also, great quality. All right, let's see what's happening over here. I'm going to give it a little bit more time. And while those are cooking, let's get the rest of this dish together. I've got some parsley that I'd like to chop up. And my trick for chopping parsley is to gather it together as fine as I can get it into a little ball, and then chop through it, and that brings it under control. A rustic dish, to my mind, calls for a more coarse chop, and so I'm going to call that done. We'll move it over here. I've got some beautiful mint, and mint, I may have mentioned already, is one of those herbs that when you chop it will turn black. There's enzymes that when they're exposed to air turn black. So I'm going to create a chiffonade, make a little cigar, if you will, of the leaves, and then just cut straight across into very fine shreds. And that's the way to chop mint so that you don't end up with a black, watery mess. There's mint. Let's check in on our squash. Nice color. So what I'm going to do is change the angle here so that we get the nice crosshatch marks. And we'll continue to cook them. I've got some olives, and I want to add olives to this dish. So here's pitted olives. And I'm going to cut these, not just chop them, but maybe cut them into nice little rounds. It takes a little bit more time, but with the squash on the grill, I've got the time. Very nice. Just going to season these again with a little bit of salt. And we'll cook them on the second side until they're tender. Now, you can evaluate tenderness a lot of different ways, but just looking at them is not the best. Piercing it with a knife and seeing that the knife not only goes in easy but comes out easy is a good indication of tenderness. These are still hanging on a little bit. So we'll give them a chance to cook on the second side. I would say another 2 minutes and we should be there. We're going to have a delicious plate of grilled squash. It's going to have a really compelling flavor profile. It's going to be bright with mint and briny with olives, and I'm going to squeeze lemon and add lemon zest to the top. It's going to be really delicious, but most of us, even if we're trying to eat more and more vegetables in our diet, would think of that as a side dish rather than a meal or an entree. So to round things out, I brought a little bit of a tomato sauce. It's a tomato sauce that was made by taking raw tomatoes and just blending them, squeezing half the seeds out, blending them with some olives and some mint and a little bit of basil, and then just warming it very, very briefly. It's a simple tomato sauce, but this time of the year, when the tomatoes are great, it's a nice tomato sauce. Here I've got some lentils that were cooked with onions and garlic and celery, and I put some herbs in there. And I think you can start to imagine that these squash, which we might consider a side dish, could easily become a main meal, albeit a vegan meal. All right, let's have another look at what's going on the grill. We're starting to get some color on the second side. We'll turn them one more time. Okay, at this point, I would say the squash are done. And we grilled them. It was pretty easy to do. There wasn't that many pieces to deal with. But if you decide that you have a lot more people to serve, then what we can do here is begin to cut these in smaller pieces. And let me take care of that right now. I'm going to cut it on a bias because I like the looks of it. As you're putting them onto the plate, pay attention to color. So we'll make sure that we get some of the yellow squash and the green squash. And to finish this, here goes a little bit of lemon zest over the top. As soon as it hits the hot squash, I get this wonderful blast of citrusy freshness. And then parsley can make its way on here, along with the mint. Let's scatter on some olives. And then sort of an impromptu dressing can be as simple as lemon over the top and olive oil. Sometimes if I'm feeling lazy, I will just put wedges of lemon on here, and I'll let people take care of the dressing themselves. All right, so there's one dish. Now, before we put this to bed, let's make another plate the way this might look like if it were an entree. So, there is the way it might look if it were an entree. I've shown you two variations. You've got the grilled summer squash as a side dish, and then you've got an entree. And I would suggest to you that if somebody put that in front of you, you would enjoy this every bit as much as if you had an entree that featured meat. So you're eating vegetarian, but it's not a hardship, it's a delight. So we've already grilled zucchini, we've sauteed zucchini. What about roasting zucchini? It's an easy thing to do, and I'm going to show you a dish that may remind you of lasagna, because at the end of the day what I've done is I've deconstructed lasagna and put it together in a new and different fashion. So here we go. I've got some zucchini or summer squash here, and I'm going to slice it into planks. There they are. And they're probably about 1/4 of an inch thick, maybe a little bit less. This is a Japanese mandolin. It's very, very sharp, but if you take your time, it works pretty well. And what I'm going to do is take and lay these slices out. I'm going to brush them lightly with olive oil. And then let's season them with salt and pepper. And these can roast in a pretty hot oven because they're so thin. I would say about 450 degrees. It'd be great if you could get a little color on them. And if you wanted to run them under the broiler, you could certainly do that. Here, I've got some that have already been cooked. And as you can see, they're very, very tender. Or maybe here, if I bring it over here, you can see how tender they've become. All right, there's another thing I'd like to do, and that is, while the oven's on, just make some cheese crisps. It's really simple, and they're very, very delicious. So I've got a pan with what's known as a silpat, a silicone mat. You can buy these. They're great because nothing will stick to them, even melted cheese. And what I'm going to do is take some grated Parmesan and just spread it very, very thin. Just like that. And once you get your zucchini out of the oven, turn it down to about 325 degrees. And then just put these in. And keep an eye on them. You don't want them to brown too terribly much. If they get too dark brown, they get bitter. But I'll set this aside. And what I can do is show you a couple that I've got done already. And what's remarkable is that they're very, very crisp, almost like a cracker. So these are done already. They hold really well, so you can do them well in advance. All right, how about the filling for our lasagna? Well, there's some ricotta cheese. That's not a bad start. I'm going to season it with salt and pepper. And then we're going to give it a little punch with some Parmesan. And likewise, some lemon zest. Okay, we'll stir that all together. I'm not going to be baking this, so I don't want to put raw egg in there. And sometimes you'll get ricotta that has been drained a little bit more than others, and it'll be dry, and if that's the case, just add a little bit of cream. This could even be sour cream if that's what you've got on hand. And there's our filling, all done. Okay, so we've got the zucchini, the crisps, the filling. Here's the plate that I'm going to work on, and we're going to flavor this dish with olives, pine nuts, pesto, and sun-dried tomatoes. Here we go. First things first. We're going to anchor this dish with some cheese on the bottom, and then we'll lay the squash right on top. Then we'll flavor it with a little bit of pesto, And let's put on another little dollop of cheese on each of these. Olives. Now, when you're doing repetitive tasks like this, the way to do it is to do all of one thing at a time. So that's why I'm building 5 at the same time. Here, we'll put some pine nuts on. And then finally, some of these dried tomatoes. These are the ones that were packed in oil, so they're nice and juicy and delicious. All right. And then let's fold over the squash. I would say if there's kids living in your house, you should have them help you with this, because it's really kind of fun. And then finally, we'll fold over one last time. Sometimes if I'm doing a lot of these, the cheese will make its way into a pastry bag, and that'll make your life a little bit easier. Tuck a little bit of basil in there. Just a nice extra virgin olive oil drizzled around the whole thing. And that's it. That's all there is to it. It's a fun dish. It's fun to eat. Each bite brings a little bit something different, and you can probably recognize the inspiration from lasagna from the ingredients and the technique, but it's something very different, and it's something that I think your guests will really respond to. So, just last week, my neighbor dropped off on my front porch a bag of zucchini. Why? Because he had too many zucchini from his garden. I had been cooking zucchini all week long, and now I had more. And so I decided it was time to pickle zucchini, and I'd like to share that with you today. I've got some zucchini right here, and what I want to do is slice them very, very thin, because I want to make these pickles happen very quickly. Slice them thin, and then put them into ice water with a little bit of salt. So here we go. The mandolin is making an appearance again. And I want to take a little bit of care so that I get nice round pickles, nice round slices of zucchini. And, you know, this is what they're going to be looking like right here. Nice and uniform. I chose zucchinis that are small enough that there's not a lot of seeds that'll be soft on the inside. So we'll carry on slicing here. And then as we get closer and closer to the blade, we decide that this isn't worth the risk, and that gets thrown away. All right, those need to sit in the ice water with salt for about an hour. And what happens is the ice will melt over that hour, but more than that, the salt will begin to draw moisture out, and the zucchinis will get crispy, and they won't water down the pickling liquid later on. So right here, I've got some zucchinis that have already been soaked. They've been drained, and they're ready to go. Next, we need to make the pickling liquid. And in a pan with some heat, in goes cider vinegar. The amount I'm making would pickle probably about 6 pounds of zucchini. Cider vinegar and sugar. It's maybe a little surprising how much sugar goes in there. We'll season it with salt. And then in terms of spices, here I've got mustard, ground mustard, and I've got turmeric. This is everybody's darling these days. It's considered very, very healthy. Those go in. And then I'll just put them here and bring them over. I've got 2 different colors of mustard seed. I've got brown mustard seeds and lighter mustard seeds. If you don't have 2 different colors, it's not the end of the world, but I was lucky enough to have them both, and so I'm going to use them. We'll give that a big stir and bring it to a boil. Today I'm not going to bring it to a boil because we're not going to make the pickle start to finish. But there's an interesting exercise that you can do, and that is this, that once your pickling liquid is gathered together, just give it a little taste. and see if you can learn a little something about the balance between acidity, sweetness, and salt. Because all three of those things are represented in this liquid. It's pretty intensely flavored, and it's intensely flavored why? Because it has to carry the day with about 4.5 pounds of zucchini. But look for that balance between salt, sweet, and acid. And then things like mustard seed and spices are sort of secondary. Once that comes to a boil, you take it and you pour it over the zucchini that have already been sliced and soaked, and that's it. They sit overnight, and the following day, they're done. Make sure that you store them in a non-reactive container, so don't put them into something that's aluminum, because the acidity and the salt will eat away at the metal. If it can be plastic or maybe a Pyrex pie plate, something like that, those would work very, very well. Anyhow, the following day, your pickles are done. And here I've got two that I've made. Here's the zucchini pickles. They were made yesterday. They're perfect today. They're still a little bit crunchy, and the soaking in ice water with salt helps with that. But maybe the best thing about them is that they're fresh. They taste fresh. I haven't taken the canning jars and put them into boiling water and cooked them for 35 minutes. No, I poured the boiling pickling liquid over the top, and that was it. So there, side by side with some pickled red onions, or if you're going to visit a friend, maybe the friend that gave you the zucchini in the first place, drop off maybe a jar or two of pickles for them to enjoy as well. Give it a shot and see what you think. So each of us has likely been the recipient of way too many summer squash. The variety, the abundance, the sheer volume can be overwhelming, especially if you grow your own garden. But I like to think of it as a blessing, like the summer itself. Armed with a few good recipes for pickles, pastas, grilled treats, I say go and seize the season.